France in the 18th century, a social hierarchy with the king and the nobility throwing huge parties every night, only off the backs of the hard-working peasants. King Louis XV, you want to go to war with Britain? Go for it. And they ended up losing. France was now broke, and even then the nobility partied harder. Many began to wonder whether a king was even necessary. Hey Prince Louis, your grandpa died of smallpox today, so now you're the king. And so Prince Louis Capet became Louis XVI in May 1774. But Louis XVI was not ready to guide a nation. The first thing he did was help the United States secure its independence from Great Britain. But now France was even more broke, and the angry peasants became very hateful of Louis XVI's wife, the Archduchess of Austria, Marie Antoinette, who continued to use money on her lavish lifestyle and her hair. And their solution to all of this was to tax the poor. The peasants did not like how inconsistent the tax rate was across France, and that the first two classes would pay little to no tax at all. And with the natural disaster destroying the harvest, the peasants had enough. They took to the streets, robbing bakeries, and bakers were hanged. So the king decided to call the Estates General, basically representatives from all three classes, an advisory body, and was rarely called upon. Okay, the first class or the clergy, 150,000 people, you guys get one vote. The second class, 350,000 people, one vote. And the third class, basically everyone else, 27 million people, you get one vote. But the problem was this kept happening. Alright, we want to raise taxes on the third class. Hands up for yes, hands up for no. 2-1. Taxes are going to be raised on the third class. The third class realised that anything they did would be outvoted by the two upper classes, but they thought since they were 98% of the French population, they could make their own government and run the country themselves, and the National Assembly was born. There was nothing the king could do. I have the key and I've locked you out of your building. So the National Assembly went to a tennis court down the road and on the 20th of June 1789 made the promise to keep meeting until the king gave in to their demands for equality. Among the National Assembly were some of the most educated members of the third class, like Maximilien Robespierre or Georges Danton. Some members of the first two classes even joined their cause. Some of these men made a separate radical party called the Jacobin Club, and many Jacobins wanted the removal of the king himself, and they were worried the king was preparing to capture them all and execute them. The people of Paris, sick of a centuries-long system of sick inequality, knew it was now or never to take action, and they armed themselves. In the early hours of July 14, 1789, a mob stormed a military hospital and secured a large amount of rifles. The rifles had no gunpowder though, but fortunately they knew where to get some: the Bastille. Later in the day, the crowd demanded the man in charge, Delaunay, surrender and hand over the gunpowder. Delaunay stalled for time by inviting a few members of the crowd in for negotiation, though before long the mob became impatient and they stormed the building. The National Assembly, hearing this, though not directly involved, loved it. Fueled by Jean-Paul Marat, a man stuck to a bath who wrote that the only way the revolution could live was to kill the king and the nobility, and it became very popular. In August, the National Assembly, with help from founding father Thomas Jefferson, wrote the Rights of Man, a document which guaranteed the liberty and equal rights of all men. Only men. But the people were still starving, and they realized the king could not see this issue because he lived in Versailles away from Paris. So a crowd of women, 7,000 strong, decided to march to the king in Versailles. Along the way, more and more people joined them, and when they arrived, they demanded to speak with the king. They broke in with the intent of murdering the queen, who escaped to a secret bedroom passage. And so the king had no choice but to speak with the crowd, and he agreed to share his power with the National Assembly, and he returned to Paris with the angry crowd, removing the separation between him and his people. And he watched as for the next few years his power was slowly taken away, and he had to stay on the revolutionaries' good side. Seeing the situation turning sour, the king decided to leave France and take his country back from abroad. And since Marie Antoinette was an Austrian, they could just go to the Austrian Netherlands. And they failed. And now time was up. The king was considered a traitor for trying to abandon his people. So, with the Constitution of 1791, Louis became a complete figurehead, a constitutional monarch. But Jacobins wanted Louis to be removed entirely, and the National Guard, aka revolutionaries, fired on a crowd of revolutionaries. It wasn't good. This incident showed the deep division between the people of the revolution: moderates who wanted the king as a figurehead, and radicals who wanted to see him deposed. Around this time, the guillotine became the new form of execution. Everyone, regardless of their class or economic status would receive the same death penalty. A heavy blade falls on the head, a bit of blood, and the person is no more. And again, fear took hold. Many members of the clergy and nobility fled to other parts of Europe, and the top classes of these other countries did not like what they were seeing. They feared that revolutionary ideas would spread to their own lands. The new legislative assembly feared the European nations would attack them, and so France declared war first on Austria in April 1792 and immediately got blasted. Prussia joined the war on the Austrian side, and the war of the First Coalition had just begun. Prussia warned that if anything happened to King Louis, they would burn Paris to the ground. The people were outraged, fighting King Louis fled to the Legislative Assembly, where it was decided to abolish the monarchy entirely. King Louis XVI was now just another regular citizen of France, and 1 month later, the First French Republic was officially declared.